Hi, welcome back to Serger Tip Clips. Today I'd like to talk to you about handling fabric. The way we handle our fabric as it's feeding through the machine is just as important as making sure that our machine settings are correct. Handling fabric properly can make the difference between a fantastic result and a flub. So let's go to the machine and see what we're talking about. I cut two pieces of a t-shirt weight knit, and they're an accurate 10 inches long. And I just want to show you how pulling from either the front or the back of the foot as the fabric is feeding through can make a difference in the finished dimension. And as you know, we all work so hard to make sure that our pattern alterations are accurate for our body. And sometimes when the fabric comes out of the machine and we try it on, suddenly it's too big or it's gaping, and part of that can be handling and pulling the fabric from the front or back. I've got my differential feed set on 1.3. I tested that already, but even with that higher setting, let's take a look at how operator technique can make a difference. Sometimes handling fabric improperly can either be a right hand or a left hand issue, and I'll show you both and what I'm talking about. I've got my machine set up for a narrow overlock. The right needle is in and the upper and lower loopers are threaded. I've got cream color thread in so that you can see the stitching against the color of the knit. But sometimes as I start stitching along, and other people do too, just to control the fabric without even realizing it, rather than lightening up the pressure on the foot control and slowing down, we tend to hold back the fabric, and we're pulling and stretching it as we do that. So I'm just going to stitch off this edge and show you. And it's very clear that you can see the edge is a little bit wavy and definitely stretched from the original 10-inch dimension. That's a right-hand error. So let's take a look at what a left-hand error will do. I just showed you what pulling and stretching the fabric with the right hand can do, but sometimes we have a tendency also to pull along as the fabric feeds through to the back with our left hand. So that can cause stretching and distortion of our fabric dimension as well. So I've already stitched off a couple of inches, and I'll continue along and show you what that does. And if you notice, the fabric is no longer feeding straight on the back of the machine. I'm pulling off to the left, and that can cause inaccuracy also on our seam allowance, but stretching out our fabric too. And as you know, once knit fabric is stretched, it's done. So you can see the difference with that too. You can see the waviness, you can see the extra length now that's been incorporated on the edge of the fabric with the stitching and pulling. We've already looked at right hand and left hand improper techniques. So let's look at what a good technique will do. I've lifted the toe to get my fabric under the foot just so that I don't have to push it along and make sure that that beginning edge doesn't stretch out. I'm just trimming off a little bit, and I'm going to stitch along. I've got my hand guiding the fabric, and with my left hand, I just like to keep that nice and flat on the fabric to help it along, and gently guide the right edge along also with my fingertips. And by just gently moving it along, I haven't stretched or distorted the edge one bit. And with that higher differential feed, that's helping not stretch out the fabric edge. So you can see, nice and smooth, the fabric edge is straight, and it's still at that original 10-inch dimension. Handling technique is important for all types of serger techniques, but it's particularly critical when you're working on sheer fabrics with a rolled hem. That rolled hem is just hanging on to a few fibers on the edge. So we'll go to the machine and take a look at good and bad technique. I'm all set up at my machine. I have sheer fabric in, and I've changed my settings for a rolled hem. One of the questions I get asked when I go around the country and do workshops for the Serger is people sometimes have problems getting a rolled hem to hang onto the edge of a sheer fabric, especially if they're just kind of skimming off the whiskers along the edge. And one of those reasons, and this is just one of them, we'll talk about other ones on different tip clips for rolled hems, is hanging onto the fabric and pulling off to the left with the left hand. So you can see the position of my left hand. I'm just going to skim off the whiskers along the edge of the fabric, but you'll see that as I pull along, if I'm angling that fabric off to the left and a rolled hem is just hanging onto a few fibers on the right edge of the fabric, it doesn't give it a chance to really hang on, and some of the stitches can fall off the edge. So I'm just stitching along and I'm pulling that fabric off to the left, and you can see how the fibers have pulled off because I have pulled off to the left. Even toward the end, some of the stitches have fallen off the edge, and you can see how the fibers have pulled off because I have pulled off to the left. And that frequently happens as we're getting to the end of the fabric. I don't know whether it's that we're anxious to finish it off, but as we pull off and the stitches aren't on the fabric, you have to redo the whole edge anyway. Let's take a look at a good handling technique and good hand position for this rolled hem on sheer fabric. You can see my left hand is fairly flat on the fabric to guide it straight from front to back as it's being fed through the machine, and my right hand is ever so slightly just angling the fabric so that the knife can skim off the whiskers on the edge. But this will give the stitch a chance to hang on to the edge and give you a beautiful rolled hem that will hold on to your sheer fabric. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you again next week for another fantastic Serger tip clip.